Hi everyone, welcome back to the Be More podcast, where we inspire you to be a little bit more of every role within the Salesforce community and beyond. For today's session, we are exploring what it takes to be more know. And I'm joined today by Tracy. So Tracy, can you introduce yourself for our audience, please?
Hello, hi. My name is Tracy Keeling. I'm currently a marketing cloud consultant at Capgemini and also a technical lead for them. I've been in the Salesforce community for a very long time, about 12 to 15 years, I think it is now. So I've been an end user and I've been a consultant for about 12 years, loving all the variety that comes with that.
For today's session, we are going to explore what it takes to be more know. So if you were to try to quantify that role and explain it to our audience, what would you use to describe what it takes to kind of be more know?
I think what I wanted to talk about today was about being more know from the point of view of managing yourself and how that supports not only yourself but the whole of your team and the company. So being more know, I think it's about definitely being self-aware, using the correct tools, and being able to have conversations about no and saying no.
Thinking about this now as somebody that's doing that in their Salesforce-based role, whether they're a consultant, developer, a BA or an admin, kind of whatever role they are, you obviously have to say that to different people and perhaps people at different levels to you. How do you find that interaction? And maybe kind of a little bit of a side question, but how do you build the confidence to kind of say no to people no matter what level they're at and kind of try to manage their expectations a little bit as well?
Yeah, it's a really important thing. But I think what you need to be able to do is back up your response with information and data and reasoning. So for me, that's about, I've got these things on, I've got a list of them, they're going to take this amount of time, and I've got 3 meetings, and I've got this. So I don't want to, and then I want to allow an amount of lag time because I'm going to get interrupted by phone calls. I'm going to get interrupted by this. I'm going to get interrupted by that. I always overestimate because that allows me to deliver. And I think, and I want to be comfortable in the number. I want to make sure that when I do give a time frame, that it's achievable and that I don't miss it. So what I'm trying to say is when you're having these conversations, what you need to do is work out what you have got already on and then balance this. And it's kind of like, I've got these 3 things that I've got to get done. I put them in and now you're asking me to do this extra one. So that puts me over my bandwidth. So then it depends on who I'm talking to as to what the conversation is. So if I'm talking to a colleague who's my senior, I'll go, I've already got these ones on, I haven't got room. Is there someone else who can pick it up or does it need to be me?
Yeah.
What should we move around? Nice, relaxed conversation. And I think it does depend on where you're sitting at that point. You might go, I need to tell, I've got too much on. I'll talk to the PM and let them see where I am and say, I think either we need to work it out or we might need to have the customer involved and they need to make the decision. I think it's quite often project dependent and you need to be able to work that out to a point yourself. So sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error sometimes around finding the right people to have the conversation with. And sometimes I get a little bit Teflon with it if I can. If I'm being Teflon because I've already got enough on and I don't want to be having conversations to work out what I'll be trying to do because that means I've got even less time to get done what I've got to get done. So yeah, it definitely depends. But what you do need to do is make sure that you can demonstrate or provide information on what it is that means you can't do it now or why you're trying to say no. You're saying no with backup, not just no. That has to be and no, not now, and allowing time to later. So because I've got lots of friends who work in other areas, and funny enough, I have conversations with them, and one of them was really struggling. She's got so much work to do, and I told her to start planning what she's doing, work out how long it takes, and put everything together. And then if someone else comes along, just tell them, oh, I've got all these booked in, but I can do that next week for you. Is that okay? And she was like, I thought they were going to really kick off because normally they want it done that day. But they went, oh, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So if you can say no, but not now, and give a time frame. Is that acceptable? So you've either got the option of, I've got too much on, what gives, or I can't do it now, but I could do it then. Is that good enough? And it's really strange because I think everyone just immediately expects that they have to do everything straight away, or they want to. I think the thing is, in our role, everyone, and I mean, well, I certainly know me, I want to help.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I want to satisfy, and I want to keep everybody happy now, but you can't. And I think it's really important. If you set a good expectation and you can deliver to that, then it keeps everybody happy.
Yeah, definitely. And part of this is about protecting yourself, right? Because you're protecting
Yeah.
your own time. But this is also about protecting your clients and your projects, like if you're on a partner side, because you don't want to jeopardize the quality of what you're doing elsewhere. How do you manage those perhaps more difficult conversations? In particular, like if you're being asked to do something and it's pushing somebody out elsewhere.
Where I am now, I would just pipe
Mm.
up, and everyone expects me to pipe up because I always pipe up.
Yeah.
But when I was a more junior, it was definitely, and it depends on what, because sometimes I do have to do the like junior roles as well. We all play different roles in different things when we need to, and it depends on the structure of the project and what the communication like is with the customer. So Tom, we've just been talking about the customer I'm working on right now. They are in there. We are a team. We're working as one. So I would just chat with them.
Yeah.
But the customer I was working on previously, no, that would not have been the case. It would be very much like I need to liaise with my PM and we've got a problem. And
Yeah.
I don't have the answer. I can show you the problem and I can show you where it's going to be. But we need to work out what we're going to do about that. It could be we need to put on more resource, or it could be that we need to set a different expectation. But we need to be doing, but the important thing is we need to do that as early as possible. So the earlier we find out we've got a problem, the more time we have to address it, and the more flexibility in the options we have to fix it.
Yeah. And I think it is important to kind of manage and set those expectations, right? And it's easier to set expectations, I don't know, 4 weeks ahead of the deadline being pushed out than it is 4 hours before the deadline, right? Thinking about this now as perhaps somebody that's listening and wants to kind of be more protective of their time and their clients and what output they're producing, and ultimately perhaps struggles to say no, right? Because it's not an easy
No,
thing.
I don't like it.
I know it's not something that comes naturally, is it?
No.
So thinking about that person, what tips or advice would you give to them about how to get started in this?
I think it is about, I keep banging on about it. You need to get it down. You need to manage yourself and be aware of it. Because I get I've worked with a lot of colleagues who are like, they've asked me to do all these things. I've got too much on and I'm working till X number of hours. And I'm like, why are you doing that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you're setting yourself, you're making yourself ill, and you're actually causing a problem for your next colleague. I'll be like, oh my God, I've got so many
Yeah.
things, and I've forgot to manage myself again.
Yeah.
And you put down the list, and even just having the list down helps. And then you're like, right, now let's put it in as to when we can get it done. Trello's really nice, and or you're just using a calendar or Excel. I love a bit of Excel. I shouldn't even say that, when I'm in
Yeah.
Salesforce, but just like simple tools that just help you. And everyone has a different way their mind works as to what works for them. Because this is one of the things I really wanted to do. I've been so excited to start having a conversation about saying no, because I wanted to try and find out from other people what they're doing, and what other interesting tools there are out there, and what everybody's doing, and other people's challenges they're having around this. But I think you just need to start getting a list down, start to plan, and then when someone comes to you with a new bit of work, you need to be able to see where that fits in the priority of what you've got, and then have the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm pretty neurodivergent, so I'm like I'm like all over the place, but someone else will just not be like that, and they'll work in a very different way. But we all need to be able to communicate with one another and provide the information. I think you just need to get it down in a list, be able to communicate that and start to say, I've got all these ones, what one takes priority? And, if people are using systems like Jira and stuff, they'll be able to see how many tickets you've got. Sometimes you only get given one ticket and then you've got to do that one and then move it through. That's a nice way for it to work. And quite often you'll find developers and people working on offshore are managed like that. So they get one story, they do that one, they move through. Or onshore, we tend to have to do a bit more than that. At least that's my experience. You're normally all over here doing about 5 or 6 or more. Which is fine, but you just need to be able to manage those. And don't forget, when you're putting those in, to remember the meetings that you've got. My last project, they were trying to get to the point where they were literally resource managing us around our time and saying we weren't doing enough story points, X, Y, Z, and all that. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. We have so many project meetings.
Yeah.
Let's add up all the... And we were spending like, almost, it turns out, I think it was 30% of our time a week was in meetings, but no one had actually added that up, and there was hardly any time to actually build anything. So we moved out to 3 and 4 week sprints, and then all of a sudden, so the actual amount of work we got done went through the roof because the percentage of the time spent on meetings decreased so much. So there's real value in, don't forget things. And you've also got, you've got your project meetings, but you might have meetings outside of even that you need to take into account in your availability.
There are those other things, like in particular, maybe you line manage people, or maybe you're running an internal initiative to get people certified in data cloud or whatever it is, right? You've got all of those other bits alongside your main task. Like in particular, if you're running or working for a consultancy, I think you've got all these different kind of competing priorities and challenges. And I think kind of what I heard from what you were saying there is, like, don't be afraid to speak up and say, well, actually, is this a good use of my time? Is kind of what I'm hearing, like using the meeting example. Would I deliver more value building things or having another meeting to plan it or to have a retro or whatever it is? Like, what's the best use of my time type thing? You can almost turn the question back on the requester, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think another thing that kind of come out of what you were saying is it's almost like a muscle memory that you kind of have to grow over time. Like, it's going to be painful the first few times. The pain doesn't necessarily go away, but it does get easier, right?
Yeah, and you find yourself when you've slipped up, and you know how to correct it, and like the fear factor, when you start to feel that, I feel overwhelmed, out of control, I've just got too much, I'm trying to manage, and I'm managing up there, and that's not where it should be managed.
It should be in Jira, your spreadsheet.
Yeah. You just it needs to go down somewhere. Because also, if you're off, how does anyone manage that? And it also helps when it comes to things like, when you want to do one-to-one, when you have your one-to-one, and you want to look at everything you've done, then if you've got it in a list somewhere, well, because I know I do loads and I forget like what I've done because it's done, it's gone. Asking me 2 months later for my 6-month review. So what have you achieved? I don't know. My customer is happy. And like, it's when you're talking about the list, like you feel like, oh, I'm not doing anything. I'm not finishing anything. I'm getting really annoyed. And that's because you keep taking on more. And you start that, and then you start that, and then you start that, and nothing gets finished. And then if you put down a whole list of everything that you're working on, no wonder nothing's getting finished if you're trying to manage all of these.
Yeah.
Something's got to give. Let's filter.
Yeah, I think put some structure around it. Thinking about now your own journey, and this is very much kind of a living, breathing thing. You're probably evolving this kind of muscle memory, as I describe it, over time. If you were to start out again, or if you were to suddenly pivot now, is there anything that you would drastically change or do in a different way?
I'd probably spend a bit more time at the beginning working out what's a good way to do that and what works for everybody, I think. I mean, the thing is, it's kind of, in the consultant world, that approach only works that one time. So at Capgemini, they have some great learning resources and stuff like that. So I would probably look for the learning resources that would support me in that. And then, so for me, obviously now I'm a manager, I have like people who work for me, and I will be making sure that they are going through that content so that they've got that backup, and that kind of thing is there available for them. But I think that probably acknowledging that it's okay to say no was something I didn't know. I think that,
Yeah.
now, if I went back now, I know that saying no is a really positive thing. Before, there was so much fear. Like,
Yeah.
saying no, I can't do it. I mean, oh my God, that's like horrific thing. Like,
Yeah. Be
and it
or
was
end
really
all.
scary. I mean, the whole reason I started to look at this, and this became something that was, a real thing that I wanted to talk about, was because a few years ago I did Blue Road Academy, ran through a cohort of refugees who were so Blue Road Academy did the proper Salesforce training, and then they
Yeah.
came to us to talk to them about what the life of a consultant was like. So one day a week we'd spend time with them talking about everything and all the stuff that was going on. And we were on like a third or fourth week or whatever, and we'd come in and do things. But this had been brewing, as I think something had obviously triggered it already, as I'd had a challenge with it. It had annoyed me, and I thought, these guys need to know about this. This is really important. I was like, I really want to talk to them about saying no and how important that is. Like, and the skill that's required to do that, and that it's okay, and it's actually really powerful, and it's dangerous not to. You're going to cause more of a problem if you don't say it than if you do say it. And then what was really funny was I did it, and I had this conversation with them, this great big speech, like I literally just wrote it all out on these whiteboards, and then delivered it. I just it was word vomit basically, and there it was on the wall, and then we said it all. And then an hour later, a couple of people from Salesforce came in to talk to them about what it was like to work in the Salesforce community from a Salesforce point of view. And then one of the questions they asked them, they turned around to them and said, what's the best piece of advice you give us? What's the one thing that we should do? And they turned around and said, learn to say no. And everyone just went, oh, and looked at me, and I thought, oh my God, this has got legs. This has to be like talked about. I learned it because I did make the mistake of taking on too much work, wasn't delivering enough, and then I had, an upset customer. I was messing up the project because things weren't being delivered when we'd agreed that we'd deliver them. As a new person going into consultancy world, it's a scary thing to say no, because you just don't want to let anyone down, but it's so you're letting them down if you don't.
Yeah.
And you're the stronger character if you do.
Yeah, I think there's power that comes with saying no. You get that power, you kind of have that authority in whatever position you're at by saying
it's authority over yourself, though. I mean, you're controlling what's in your world, and it's actually much more relaxing. It takes a lot of stress away when you've done that, and you know that you've not got too much work to do. You've got enough work to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it kind of comes to that point that you kind of lent on a little bit earlier about, instead of over promising and under delivering, you under promise and over deliver, right?
Exactly.
So you kind of subtly over time pad out that estimate so you have room if something goes wrong or something errors and it shouldn't be erroring, right? You've got a little bit of buffer to work out those problems and fix those challenges before they start to eat into other areas.
Yeah, and I think people, because people will say, yeah, just create a field. I was like, yeah, but I've got to create that field, then I've got to create validation for it. I've got to do that in a sandbox, then I have to move it up through this, then I have to move it further, then it has to go through all these processes. The fundamental thing to do doesn't take that long, but actually to move it through and do what needs to happen properly. I'm not opposed to being a cowgirl when the need must, right? But that shouldn't be your default answer. Your default answer should be, I'm doing this properly. If I'm doing it properly, it takes this amount of time, but I will always add in extra. I know I am not going to get to that in an hour. That's not going to be done in the next hour.
Yeah.
It's an hour's work. So there's a difference between the effort and the duration.
Yes.
Right. And I think it's about, when you're talking to people, you need to talk about duration, not effort.
Yeah. I think that's a good point as well, because again, from a consultancy angle, you're sometimes working on 2 or 3 projects at once. You say to the customer, it's going to take 2 hours, and the customer doesn't perhaps consider that you've got 3 other projects. So you can't use those 2 hours immediately. Those 2 hours are spread over the next week or however long you've got, right? So I think That's important because that helps manage and set the expectations as well. Certainly something that I try to adhere to. Like, if you came to me first, then I'll look after that thing first, and I'll do the other things afterwards. But I think with that conversation, again, maybe this is just me, but it comes back to kind of turning the question on them. What would you like me to deprioritize as a result? You know?
Yeah, I mean, if it's one customer, you can have that conversation.
Yeah.
But if it isn't,
I know.
then it's different, right? And so I think at our level, Tom, we can get away with having that conversation ourselves very politically, and we're fine. But when you're talking lower level, I would certainly be telling the either PMs on all the projects that this affects that I've had that conversation. So there's an awareness that these things are going on. So I'm not really wanting them to do anything, but people need to understand that that conversation's taken place, because there's massive impacts around that. You know, managing yourself and having to say no is really important, but everyone needs to know that you've said it, because and they need to be behind that comment, and supportive. I think you have to be careful at what level you make that call yourself. That again is a lesson learned and where you are and what's going on and the level of responsibility you have at the time. But I think don't be afraid to take it to your PM, or even, you know, your technical lead, or it depends on the size of the project, even a peer or someone who's just been there a bit longer than you, going, right, okay, I've got this. Who would you recommend I tell? Like, ask who you should tell, because there's definitely someone you need to tell. Always.
Over time, you learn perhaps what you can get away with and what you can't get away with, like in terms of what's within your responsibility. I think both of us are kind of at a point where we can probably get away with most things now, which is great. But you kind of had to practice that tact and diplomacy to get to that position, right? You have to build that skill up to be trusted with more and have that responsibility, right?
Yeah, definitely. And also, with each customer, I've built up that trust and honesty. So I'm always about trust and honesty, and I can be, and I am also quite blunt with my customers, not in a brutal way, but they know that, like, you know, when they're going, oh, we want this by next week, I'll immediately know I can't do it, and it'll be like on the call, I was like, I'll go away and have a look, but I don't think that's, we might need to have a conversation about that. Let me go away and really look at what we've got on, and then it'll be, I'll come back and, right, we've got these things going on as well. Exactly what you said a minute ago, Tom. Right, I've got these other ones actually. So which one would you rather have? That I have that conversation so much. I mean, literally, probably every week. It's, I've got these 5 things. You want them done. So which one do you want? Which one do you need first? Because I can't, you know, I'm not magic. I'm not Wonder Woman as much as I want to be. We can only do, you know, and from the point of view of myself, you know, I'm managing. I've got 3 people working for me, so I can get 3 things done. Which 3 do you want?
Yeah,
you're not getting them all. It's not happening. You know, as much as I want to, I hate the idea of over promising. I would so much rather do it the other way around. Right? If one of them finishes early and then they get another one done, happy days, and we look brilliant. I think it's all about everyone having a nice work life, and the work-life balance. That is so important to me, that everyone is able to do that. And I think this is one of the key skills that you have to support you in getting a really good work-life balance. It's so important, and it really drives that behaviour right from base one. You know, you need to be able to organise your time to ensure that you can have a good work-life balance. I've got a couple of quite new people who've come new to Cap on my project at the moment, and they immediately come on wanting, and they're like, oh yeah, so I worked till 8 o'clock at night last night to get this done. And I went, pardon? They don't get, oh, thank you so much. They get told off. I was like, don't you have to wait? Yeah. It's like, you know, it's definitely not and it's definitely not the CAP ethos, and it's not mine either, which is why I love working there. But it's kind of like, you know, you really need to, we will work over by exception.
Yeah.
When we, oh dear, quick, it always happens. There are those examples where you need to do it right, but definitely people's work-life balance is so important, because that means if you've got a good work-life balance, you can carry on and you can do it more and more.
Like, a fun fact, if somebody tries to book a meeting with me outside of my office hours, my calendar will just decline them. Like, that's it. They'll have to find a different time, because that is, I work within those 8 hours each day. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do flex when I need to flex, you know? those are my working hours. So in particular, when you're working with colleagues across the world, like I've got colleagues in India, I've got colleagues in Boston, and South Africa as well. My working hours are in my calendar, so anything outside that just gets declined. And I think that's another kind of, no one's going to tell you off for doing that either, right? Because that's your right. You're like entitled to do that. But I guess until you start doing it, you don't really know that you are allowed to do it, right?
But I think that is actually dependent on the company that you work for as to whether they allow that. So I think this is kind of like, you know, I think me and you, by the sounds of things, are working for some very nice companies, because obviously I have worked elsewhere.
Yeah.
Companies who would very much stick to that work-life balance attitude. So this is actually probably, you know, anyone who's not experiencing that and not experiencing companies who are allowing and worrying about your work-life balance, perhaps it's time to think about a move. Or that's not how it should be. Let's be clear, right? You know, so you can manage and if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're having these problems, if you can start to put some tools in place and have the no conversations, see how they're received. If they're not being received well, and the I'm not working overtime unless there's a real issue isn't received well, then perhaps that's an indicator of where you want to be there anymore. You know, working for a good company makes a big difference to how you feel about yourself and you know, and how work. You know, I like coming to work in the morning. And I'm looking forward to my day, my 8-hour day.
Yeah.
With my hour for lunch, which like is booked in each day.
Yeah, same.
And if and that quite often flexes.
Yeah.
But I have, but that'll be, I'll go for a walk or do whatever, but it's in there. And we're told to book it in. So, you know, there are good companies out there. And I think you know, if you need to manage yourself, it's not all, they can't do it all for you. They will have your project manager who will be able to know, or your tech lead should know what work you're doing for them on that project. But that's not everything that you have to do for your company. You will have other bits that you are managing, even if it's just preparing for your own one-to-one, or, you know, looking at your own stuff. You should also have your own like training time per month. You know, you've got to allocate amount of time to spend on personal development. That should be coming out of your available time to work on the project. But you need to book that in to your personal time and manage that around your workload. And then you need to feed back when you don't have enough time to complete everything. No one can, with the best will in the world, I don't think any company that works in the Salesforce ecosystem can say that they can manage that effectively for each individual person who's working for them. They need them to provide them with the feedback around how that's working.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's some really good tidbits within that, thinking about like my own journey and where I am now. I know for a fact that my line manager hates it when I work overtime. She will tell me off. She will be the Tracy in the room, right? And like, and I'm like, okay, lesson learned. I won't do it again. And then there are other things like I learn, okay, we need a couple of hours a week parked for internal initiatives. And my response to that was, okay, fine. 3 till 5 on Fridays is now blocked out each Friday, every Friday going forward. So I have that time for that internal initiative. So I think there's definitely some things over time. It varies on what works for you and what works for your company and your colleagues and your customers as well. Those are all kind of variables here. But I think there's some great advice and tidbits coming out of this conversation that will really help others. So before we do finish for today, what's a way for people to connect with you?
So you can always find me at the Pardot user group, the London one.
Yeah.
I'm always there. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I don't use Twitter very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this, Tom. I'm so pleased to start getting this message out, because I think it's so important that we can help everyone. I just like the idea that we're talking about it, and it's something that everyone kind of, it's okay. Like, we need to be saying no. And
and if we've inspired one person by this episode, right, we've done good, and that's another person that can then cascade and tell somebody else about it. Thanks again for your time today, and when this goes out, hopefully we reach those people.